Hey guys, as promised, there is a short video lecture today while I'm at the KLAA meeting. Today's lecture is about efficiency versus equity. If you look at the calendar for this unit, you see that efficiency versus equity plus the three key economic questions were on today's schedule. However, we have already taken care of the three key economic questions, so this is going to be it for new material for today. Since I'm not there, I wanted to just throw something in that, well, you guys know by now, even after just a week, that I'm constantly going off on tangents. Since I'm not going to be there to do that, and I have to stay kind of focused here with this video, I want to at least throw something in that's a little bit off topic for the day. And since trying to still get to know you guys and you guys getting to know me a little bit better, I should just point out that I am the father of well, it'd be better if this worked. The cutest baby ever. All right. I do not know why this is not working correctly. There we go. Cutest baby ever. That is my baby Flynn. He was born last year during Christmas break, and so I just thought I'd share that with you guys since I'm not there, and you guys probably need a little smile on your face at some point during the hour. So, today the discussion is again about efficiency versus equity. And the reality of it is today's lesson is really all about pie. Now, I don't know if any of you guys are big fans of pie. There's three different types of pie on this slide. We've got the classic apple pie. We also have my personal favorite, Oreo pie, which is totally not healthy for you, which is what makes it so delicious. But then we also have the pumpkin pie, which I just have to say, for those of you who are pumpkin pie fans, that there is possibly something wrong with you. Pumpkin pie, while I like pumpkin flavor things, and I like pumpkin scented things, pumpkin pie is disgusting. That orange stuff is so, like, the texture of it, and like I said, the flavor's not bad, but the slimy texture of pumpkin pie is just awful, and I don't understand you if you like it. I mean, get something else that's pumpkin flavored that's not all slimy and nasty. I mean, apple pie, just like awesome, perfect. Put a little caramel and ice cream on it, just amazing. Oreo pie, OMG, I cannot get enough. Pumpkin pie, disgusting. Even covered in whipped cream, there's no redeeming qualities for pumpkin pie. I just have to throw that out. I feel like that's very important. But moving on to the economic portion of the pie discussion, the questions that we have to answer as a society. And again, the last couple days we've been talking about PPC curves. We've been talking about the different production possibilities that a society has. The question is, do we want to have the biggest pie possible? That's a picture of the, at one point it was the world record largest pie. I'm not sure that it still is. Or do we want a pie that is fairly divided for everyone? So we can either have the biggest, or we can have one that's fairly divided. Can we have both? It's really debatable if we can. It's questionable if you can make a pie that is huge, but also is fair for everyone. So let's continue this discussion as we talk about efficiency versus equity. And my computer has frozen again. Hold on just a moment. All right, so what is the pie that we're referring to? The pie itself is the economy. All right, every economy out there is some form of pie, if you will. All right, some pies are very small, just like some nations are small. Some pies are enormous. As it so happens, the United States, in terms of an economy, is the largest pie in the world. We are still considerably larger than the second largest pie, which would be China. And China is just a little bit ahead of Japan, which they passed several years ago. Those are the three largest pies in the world. I believe they're followed by Germany and then Great Britain. Now, the United States has been the largest pie in the world since the late 1800s. We have been extremely successful as a nation in terms of economic production. However, now is the first time probably since the early 1800s where there are any nations that are on track to challenge us. China has made enormous strides since the 1970s in catching up to us, but we're still considerably ahead of them in most economic categories. There are some categories that they've actually caught us and surpassed us. But the pie that we're referring to is just an economy. And so, the two terms that we're talking about here are efficiency and equity. Now, efficiency is all about creating the biggest economic pie possible. I'll give you a more specific definition in a few minutes. But if we're talking about efficiency, if we want to have an efficient economy, we want to just create this gigantic pie. All right? But if we're talking about equity, if we're talking about this concept of it's not quite equality, but just something, the word equity itself means, well, not means, gosh, sorry guys, it's all about making the economic pie, making sure that it is distributed fairly. It does not necessarily mean equally, but fairly, this concept of, is it fair to everyone? Not is it equal for everyone, is it fair? And again, we'll talk about what that means in a few slides. So first, to talk about slide, well, the question is, which is more important? So we have to make a decision as a nation, as a society. Is it better to have a big pie, or is it better to have a fairly divided pie? And that is a decision that every nation, every society has to make. Some nations choose, we're going to have as big a pie as possible, and other nations choose, we are going to have a fairly divided pie. So let's continue this discussion. So, and before I go on, let me just say this. This PowerPoint is, and video is linked on the Moodle page, ePark 2. So if any of this goes a little too fast for you, and it's kind of hard for me to gauge how fast it's going since I'm sitting here by myself and I'm not watching you guys take notes, if you miss anything, it is available on the ePark page for you. So first of all, let's talk about the different types of efficiency. So we have what's called productive efficiency. Now this is something that'll come up again in Unit 2, come up again in Unit 3, Unit 4, Unit 5. The idea of productive efficiency and allocative efficiency are extremely important in a market or capitalistic economy. Productive efficiency means that goods are produced at the minimum cost. We talked about that when we were talking about the three key economic questions. The second question is, how will it be produced in the cheapest way possible? Productive efficiency means that as a nation, we are producing goods at the absolute lowest price or cost that we can produce them at. That is a sign of efficiency. It means that everything is working together, all the resources are being employed, and things are just cheap to make. Right? And that is one of the goals of an efficient society. There's also the idea of allocative efficiency. That means that the goods that society demands are the ones that are being produced. Again, this is a sign of an efficient society. All right? Our society only makes the goods that and services that people want to purchase. All right? There are societies out there that don't care about this. They don't care that society gets what that the people in society get what they want. The government might choose what the people want. That's not a sign of efficiency. So, to refer to what we've learned the last couple days, we know that efficiency occurs when we are on the PPC curve. So anywhere on this curve represents efficiency. So again, when we're talking about efficiency, we are talking about a society that is productively efficient, meaning they're doing things at minimum cost. We're talking about something that's allocatively efficient, meaning we're providing society with the right mix, and we're doing it somewhere along this curve. Efficiency in essence, means that you will have the biggest pie possible, which is a benefit to everyone in that economy. This picture of the pie is the United States gross domestic product, or its GDP, which is everything that's produced within the country. That happened to be for the year 2012. Everything within a country is part of their GDP, and we'll talk more about GDP when we get to macroeconomics. But if you are efficient, if you have taken steps as an economy to be efficient, you're going to have an absolutely enormous pie, the biggest pie that you can possibly have. All right? And that doesn't just benefit the wealthy, that benefits everybody. The bigger the pie is, even poor people, like in the United States, the slice of the pie for a poor person is much, 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 much larger than the slice of pie of someone that lives in sub-Saharan Africa. All right, the bigger the pie, the more benefit to everyone in that economy. However, not everyone is going to have an equal share in that pie. For every Mark Zuckerberg, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and Donald Trump, there are many, many, many homeless people or people that are struggling to get by, even in the United States. In fact, in the United States, we actually have more income inequality than any other developed country in the world. If you look at our income inequality in the United States, we actually have income inequality that is about the same level as sub-Saharan African nations. So just because we have a gigantic pie does not mean that everyone has an equal share. So, let's talk about equity. Equity means that the pie is fairly distributed. But the question becomes, what is fair? What you and I believe is fair might be different than what someone who lives in poverty in an inner city like Detroit, Chicago, New York might be a different viewpoint on fair. Compared to someone who lives in Greenwich, Connecticut, where people live in mansions and there's Bentley dealerships on every street corner. All right, fairness is a deeply personal concept, and so how do we determine what is fair in an economy? Well, fairness is what the concept of equity is all about. So again, just to reaffirm, equity does not necessarily mean equality. All right? We are willing to accept, especially here in the United States, but then in most developed countries, we don't believe that the pie has to be exactly equal size slices for everybody. All right? We understand that some people take on jobs that have more value than others, that certain things or certain people take risks and deserve to be rewarded. All right, we understand that equity is not communism, where every single person is supposedly equal in the eyes of the government and their assets and their incomes reflect that. All right, we're willing to accept the difference in the size of the slices, so long as things are, again, the word we keep coming back to, is fair. So for fairness, equity means that most people have access to the same things, even if some benefit more than others. All right, most people, as many as you can possibly have access to the same things, even if some people benefit more than others. So to go back to that slide a few slides ago, all those billionaires, they have access to certain things. They have benefited more than others, but we're okay with people being billionaires. We're okay with Bill Gates being worth $80 billion and Warren Buffett being worth $60 billion and Mark Zuckerberg being worth $25 billion, even though he's 30 years old. We're okay with those things as long as most people have access to the same things that those guys have access to. All right, some examples: healthcare, a minimum income level, public services, police, fire, education. These are things that as long as everyone has access to, we're willing to accept the fact that some people are going to be more successful and some people are going to become billionaires as long as we have a level playing field at the beginning. As long as at the bottom, when you're just getting started out, when you're sitting in a classroom in Salem High School, that you have the same chance as anyone else that's out there. As long as there's that sense of fairness, then we have what is considered equity in an economy. So, if equity means if a group does not have the same level of benefit as others, then society will redistribute the pie to that group at the cost of others. So, if a group does not have the same level of benefit, for example, if a group of people, say the working poor in Inkster or Detroit, let's say that there's some families in Inkster and Detroit that are they're really poverty stricken. All right, they can't get jobs for whatever reason. Maybe they didn't have access to good education. Maybe they just have been unable to overcome poverty. All right, it doesn't matter what the scenario is. That group of people, all right, if they don't have the same level of benefit as others, if they don't have a minimum income, if they don't have a minimum set of health care, all right, then society is going to redistribute the pie to that group of people. We're going to take money from elsewhere at the cost of others, as it says. We're going to go to the wealthy and we're going to say, all right, you guys have benefited from our society. Some people need at least these services. We're going to take some of it from you and we're going to give it to others. The classic example of this is welfare. Social Security is another example of equity in a society. For people that are retired and no longer working, how do we take care of them? Welfare is for people that are poor and they can't find a job. How do we take care of them? How do we give them a sense of fairness? Not equality. We're not trying to make people that are poor into Donald Trump. We're not trying to make them equal. All right. What we're trying to say in an equitable society is that, hey, at a basic level, these people ought to at least have these many things. Let's take them from somewhere else and give it to the poor people. So when we do this, this is called a transfer payment. It is the transfer, usually in the form of some sort of tax. So when taxes on one group are then transferred to another group of people. All right, so for example, we pay Social Security taxes. Well, I should say we. You guys do if you have a job, like not an under-the-table cash job. When you get your first job, immediately have to start paying Social Security tax. If you are working for a company, like I've seen some of you guys already out working, like a Kroger or at Meijer. If you work that at a place like that, you are going to pay 7.5% of your income in the form of a Social Security tax called FICA. And then your company will match that with another 7.5%. So every paycheck that you get, 7.5% is going to come off the top, and that is going to go into paying Social Security currently to people that are 66 years of age or older. So you're helping to pay for retirees. And then when you're a retirement age, when you're 70 years old, 50 or 60 years from now, when you get that, by then it'll probably be later than 66. It'll probably be well into your 70s before you can get it. The group of younger people at that point will be paying their FICA tax, 7.5% off of every paycheck, and it will be transferred to you, in which case you will then live off of that money. So, some questions for us to consider. These are not like official things that you need to know per se, but these are the questions that you need to be thinking about as we talk about efficiency versus equity. First question, is it fair for the wealthy to have so much and not give back? A lot of wealthy people believe that there should be very little taxation, if not no taxation. All right, and the question is it fair for them to benefit so much from society? They live in a society, the United States, that has been very, very beneficial to them. Should they not have to give back? But on the other side, is it fair for the poor to have little hope and not have access to basic needs? If you're poor in the United States, it's almost harder now to get out of poverty than it has been at any other time in the history of this country. All right, it's just the way it is right now. Is that fair? But then again, is it fair to take away that which the wealthy have earned? The wealthy, there are wealthy people that have not earned their money. There are people that have, it's been passed on from generation to generation, and they didn't really do anything for it. But the vast majority of people that are wealthy in today's society in the United States have earned their money. It's the first generation wealth. They started a business. In most cases, they started a business, a small business that maybe grew into a medium-sized business, maybe grew into a large business. All right, the wealthy have earned money. Is it fair to take that away from them and give it to someone that's struggling? And then is it fair to give freebies to people who are unwilling to work? A lot of people that don't have jobs don't want to get jobs because of such things like transfer payments. This is why we say equity is not necessarily efficient. Trying to help out people that are struggling takes away from efficiency, and we're trying to be equitable, but these people might choose to just take the handouts from the government and never go back to work. Now, that's not to say everyone is that way, just like it's not to say every person that's wealthy did not earn their money. There are poor people that want very much to get a job. They just can't find one, or they're in the process of getting educated to get one. Just like there are wealthy people that worked really hard to get their money. It's a very tricky conversation to have, and it's a conversation that we will continue to come back to as this year goes on. Actually, the very last activity we do, the very last day of class in June, will be a debate that basically boils down to this very discussion. So we're starting with it week 2, and it'll continue to permeate everything we talk about the rest of this year. So, most modern societies will sacrifice some efficiency to obtain some equity. The question is how much? All right, it depends on the values of the society. But most societies have decided we can't just let people be like totally poverty-stricken. We cannot allow that. We have to give people at least a basic set of services, quality of life, if they are our citizens. All right, but again, it depends on the values of the society. For example, in Germany, they place a high value on equity, but they're still a very efficient society. For the size of the country, Germany is probably the most powerful economic force in the world. They're not as big as the United States or China, but then again, their country is not nearly as big as our country either. And they do believe in equity. They believe in health care for all their citizens. They believe in a very strong social safety net, if you will. But they still maintain their efficiency. The United States places its premium on efficiency. We do say that we have levels of, that we do provide for some level of equity, but we have very low levels of equity, which is kind of surprising for the amount of money that we put into it. We put more money into it than any nation on earth, into equity, into between healthcare and welfare and all those things. We put more money into it than any nation on earth, and yet our country still has more inequality than any developed nation on earth. We do it, but we just do an awful job at it, is basically what it boils down to. So, we're getting close to the end. This will be one of the biggest debates of 2016 as we watch the presidential election unfold. You guys will get to see it in the debates that are held. Right now, I think there's still 15 Republican candidates left. One of them dropped out this week, Rick Perry, but the rest of them are still there. Right now, there's only 2 Democratic candidates, but the main Democratic candidate up until this point has been Hillary Clinton. That's her number one issue, was this idea of inequality, efficiency versus equity. The Republicans take a very different viewpoint on it, but it has already come up with them as well. And just to show you the level of inequality in the United States right now, if you break the United States population into 5 different groups, the wealthiest 20%, the next 20%, and then the next. The wealthiest 20% of Americans, so the top 62 million people, own 85% of all the wealth. They are the Pac-Man here in this figure. just 1 out of 5 Americans owns 8.5 out of $10, if you will, in the country. The upper class, the next 20%, own about 11%. The middle class, which is what most people in Plymouth Canton fall into, own about 4% of the wealth in the United States. And then the bottom 40% own about 0.3% of all the wealth in the United States. The top 20% own 85%, the bottom 40% own 0.3%, and then the other two groups own about 15% of the wealth in the United States. So, not a very equitable distribution, but again, the United States pie is much larger than any pie on earth. So again, the working poor and the poorest 20% in the United States have a much better life than the poorest 20% in, say, Nigeria or even India, Bangladesh, any of those countries that have a large group of poor people in them. The United States poor is doing way better, but it's still very unequal in the United States. Our society is a society based on efficiency, based on having the biggest pie possible, and worrying, well, maybe a little more these days about equity, but less than many other countries on earth. So, which is more important, efficiency versus equity? You're going to have to decide that on your own. I can't tell you. I can tell you that the United States puts emphasis on efficiency. Other countries put their emphasis on equity. Some of you are going to be predisposed to one or the other based on the way you've been raised. Others have a totally open mind you haven't figured out for yourself yet. It is a discussion that will continue to come up as the semester goes on. And so I want you today to start formulating, what do I feel about efficiency versus equity? Homework for tonight. Finish quiz number 1. If you didn't finish it in class on Monday, finish that up. We'll go over that first thing on Wednesday. I was going to have you do a reading in class. It basically would have just been busy work. So what I'm going to ask you to do for the rest of the hour is simply work on something for another class if you have it. Try to keep the volume down. Try to finish the quiz up if you didn't finish that yet. And I will see you guys tomorrow.